again, everybody, and welcome to the inaugural Northside Nine podcast. I'm your boy, Sean Lugo. We got Kyle Duplessis in the house, and we got a special guest we're going to introduce in just one quick second because we are on the sweet dawn of another Major League Baseball season. You don't have to be Ernie Banks or the Los Angeles Dodgers ticket office to have baseball fever. Heck, even Jerry Reinsdorf is excited right now. It's a beautiful time because the White Sox haven't lost a game yet. Opening day is just a few weeks away before the Chicago Cubs head to Tokyo, and we are off on our preseason preview show. And this is brought to you in part by River Street Tavern, 102 North River Street, your home for Tuesday night half-price tacos, trivia night, and this Sunday, stop in for the Great American Race, the Daytona 500, at a Daytona International Speedway, where you can enjoy half-price chicken bites and $1 off draft beers. And as I stated, we have a very special guest. This man is a writer. He's a podcaster. He's a Chicago native. And I've valued his opinion for many, many years. He's well known throughout the Chicago Cubs community. He is a writer, for Fansided since 2017. He's also the host of Bill Swarsky's Sports Talk Chicago and Through the Garden Sports Podcast. Welcome to the show, everybody, Alex Patt. Thank you so much for joining us today, Alex. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me, guys. Looking forward to it and just trying to survive the last of this winter. Looking forward to spring, obviously, for many, many reasons. So we just got to weather the rest of the storm and look forward to some ball. That's what I say every February. It's the only good thing to look forward to.
Yeah, but the Bears have crapped us out, and the Blackhawks continue to be in last place. So all we have to look forward to is opening day on the north side. So I hope everybody else out there is doing well and staying out of the snow, because old man winter's thrown us a curveball here in the Midwest, and he's finally caught us in his crosshairs. So everyone stay safe out there. I hear there's going to be another storm coming a little bit this afternoon. So everyone, again, please stay safe. As we get into this, there's been a lot of things that have happened here in the offseason. The Chicago Cubs, have more questions than Craig Counsell has in his lineup right now and Luis Robert has for his agent. So let's get into this and break down the Chicago Cubs as they report to camp. Ladies and gentlemen, last year our Chicago Cubs finished 83-79, finished tied for second place with the St. Louis Cardinals in the National League Central, 10 games behind our division winner, the Milwaukee Brewers. Ugh. For the second year in a row, the Cubs have just fallen short, and we're here to find out if the Cubs can push across the NL playoff line. My friends, Alex, I'm going to ask you really quick, after missing the playoffs by a single game each of the last two seasons, are the Cubs president Jed Hoyer and Carter Hawkins on a playoff or you're fired mandate in 2025?
So, I look at the situation right now, what they've added, what they're coming off of, and the division they play in. And I would say if I had to put odds on them winning the division and making the postseason, I'd say about 53%. It's a little better than half. The biggest questions I have for the Cubs are one, is your starting pitching going to regress a lot or not? Because I'm a little worried about that. Last year, the starting pitching was great. But outside of Justin Steele, you don't have a lot of guys that strike out high numbers or get a lot of ground balls. Now, Shota Imanaga can strike out guys, but Tyone's not a high strikeout guy. Assad's not a high strikeout guy. They got Colin Ray, who's not a high strikeout guy. And you got a lot of fly balls coming from those pitchers. And last year, the fly balls weren't an issue because the wind was always blowing in last year. I don't know what that's going to be like this year. And I just don't know if you have enough in that rotation right now. I think it can keep you in games in the most part, but you're going to have to rely on your offense scoring runs. And the bullpen's been pretty much redone. The bullpen is always a question because relievers are so fickle, but you did put work into the bullpen. You have a closer in Ryan Presley, who's a little older. isn't the strikeout guy you would ideally want from a modern day closer, like a K per nine of 11 plus. But he's been effective over his career. He does get ground balls, and you have a very good ground ball defense. So hopefully that plays. The other questions I have beyond the Cubs are, what are the Brewers going to do? They lost Willie Adames. That's a big loss, but they always seem to land on their feet. They lost their closer. They traded him away. They'll probably find some other guy to fill in and have an ERA of like 1.2. And then the Cincinnati Reds, are they going to be healthy? And if they're healthy with Terry Francona at the top, that could be a little worrisome if you're an opponent because there's a lot of talent on that team. They were just so banged up last year. Those are the two big questions I have in the division. The Pirates are going to have Paul Skeens and they're going to have a pretty good rotation, but they never fully invest in that team as a whole. I don't think they're going to be a pushover. I don't think they're going to be a division winner. And it seems strange to say, but I'm not worried about the Cardinals. They're the team I worry the least about because they've made it clear they're in a transition. Could they be semi-competitive and give you a tough time? Yes. Do I think they're going to be a 90-win team? No, I do not. So those are the biggest questions I have for the Cubs right now. And just looking at the odds of will he be in the postseason, I think there is a good chance, but I'm not writing them in completely. I think that if they're going to get into the postseason, you're going to have to win the division because there are too many good NL teams in the other divisions that are probably going to be in that wild card chase.
Kyle, what are your thoughts, man?
Unfortunately, Sean, I think it would have to be like a disaster for Jed Hoyer to lose his job. I think in particular, the relationship he's built with the Ricketts, Tom Ricketts in particular, right? It's almost like a fraternity in Chicago, right? We've seen this 1,000 times where guys should have overstayed their welcome. I think the Cubs would have to absolutely fall apart and have a disastrous season for him to get fired. I think even if the Cubs don't make the playoffs, they'll fall just short like they have the last couple of seasons, in particular two seasons in a row where missing the playoffs by one single game. I do think, though, to Alex's point, I think the Cubs are good enough to make the playoffs this year, and I think they can win the division. The thing about the Cubs is there's a lot of ifs this season, a lot. And you're not just talking about the guys that they brought in here with like Kyle Tucker and the relief pitchers. You're talking about the guys that have been here. Can Seiya Suzuki stay healthy? Can Nico Horner and Dansby Swanson hit consistently all season? This is the problem that the Cubs have had for a couple of years now. Not only are they not hitting consistently, but they're going in these offensive droughts for months, and they're not getting any power from anywhere in the lineup. They need these guys, particularly the young guys like PCA, Miguel Amaya, Michael Bush, Matt Shaw. These guys are going to have to play consistently this year, and they're going to have to hit for power.
Yeah, and that brings me to a good point because Alex touched on Shota Imanaga, and his fan graphs came out. And they're a little scary when you look at last year's numbers. We're going to pop them up on the screen right here. How do you feel about these numbers? His whip is higher, his earned run average is higher. How do you feel about these numbers? Do you think he's going to dip higher? As you stated, last year we had a lot of wind blowing in. He does get the ball up in the air. How worried are you about Shota? Because a lot of people are saying this is our ace, this is our guy. And I still think it's Justin Steele as our ace. Do we have two aces in your opinion, Alex?
Justin Steele is your ace, period. I don't think there's any debate about that. And listen, if those are the numbers that Imanaga puts up as like a 3, that's fine. Like, I don't have a problem with that. We know that home runs are going to be an issue with him. That's just his weakness. That's his Achilles heel. I just don't think we can expect a sub-3 ERA like we did last year. Can he get some strikeouts with the stuff he mixes in? Yes. Can he pitch to a mid-3s ERA? Yes, and that's perfectly fine. But there's no way right now I'm considering Imanaga the ace over a healthy Justin Steele. If you look at Justin Steele's numbers the last 3 years, they are so insanely consistent. And he does not give up home runs. The outlier in this rotation that tends to give up a lot of fly balls is Justin Steele. He is elite at not giving up home runs. He has been the past few years. And while he's not a 98, 99 fastball thrower, you know, he can get some whiffs with the way he mixes in his slider, the way he locates his fastball with the movement on it. So until further notice, Justin Steele is still your ace. As long as he's healthy, he should be starting the very first game of the season. But yeah, I think Imanaga realistically is a middle of the rotation pitcher, which is cool. You just wish you had one more top 2 guy in there.
Yeah, the thing for me is, because if you look at Fangraphs and Pacoda have completely different thoughts on the Cubs. You have Pacoda here at 90 wins for the Cubs, and you go to Fangraphs, and oops, that's the wrong one. My bad. Fangraphs has the Cubs. That's a little small. Oh, that's Pacoda too. I wrote the wrong thing. Sorry, fellas. The Pacoda has Fangraphs has the Cubs at about 84 wins. So are you guys, Kyle, Alex, are you guys like right in the middle of that 84? Because you bring up a great point, Alex. I have a question about who is the number 2 in this Cubs rotation. Is there a number 2 in this Cubs rotation right now? Especially how Jameson Taillon started losing velocity at the end of the season in August and September last year and into October. When you talk about when I bring up Jameson Taillon, how big of that is a concern that he lost his velocity at the end of the season and that carrying over into 2025?
Yeah, so Taillon is someone I'm actually a really big fan of. But you look at last year, the velocity, the strikeout numbers, he had a great season. There's no doubt about it. He had a really good season. But I think realistically, if you're looking at Taillon this year, you're probably looking closer towards like a 3.7, 3.8 ERA type guy and a FIP around 3.94. If that's your 4 or 5, thumbs up, great.
Right.
I don't want that to be your number 2. And that's, like I said, that's where I think we're missing here, is you don't have that number 2. I think Imanaga is realistically a 3 and Taillon is a 4 or 5. Like, if you had the rotation you had in 2016 and you look at how that all played out, well, the way I look at Taillon is a less striking out version of Jason Hamill. That is a guy that is just really rock solid, is not going to be a top 3 pitcher in a rotation, but you could rely on him to be towards the bottom. And I think that's perfect for Taillon. And like I said, I'm a really big fan of his, but if he's your 2 with a sub 7K per 9, it's a little worrisome.
What are your thoughts, Kyle, on Taillon?
Yeah, I mean, Sean, that's exactly like Alex said. I mean, I would like, first and foremost, I'd like to see them give Jameson Taillon a few starts off here and there, because it seems like he not only runs out of gas during games, but he runs out of gas during the season. I'd like to see them have a 6-man rotation at some point this season. You'd like to see if maybe Ben Brown or Javier Assad could have a couple of spot starts here and there, but it seems to me like Jameson Taillon just runs out of gas. In the beginning of the season last year, he was absolutely amazing. I mean, he was one of the best players on the Cubs, and really nobody was really talking about it, but towards the end of the season, like you said, Sean, you even saw that fastball start to drop to 92, 91, like things you didn't see early on in the season. It seems like he was just running out of gas. But I mean, I like Jameson Taillon. I think, like Alex said, I think he's a good 3-4 in your rotation, but he certainly shouldn't be your 2. I mean, Sean, you brought it up. I mean, it's the perfect question. Is there another ace on this team besides Justin Steele? And like you guys said, I mean, we even think about the first game Imanaga pitched last year. If the wind's blowing out that day, it would have been a rough, long day for Imanaga. And that's no disrespect, because I like the guy a lot and I think he's a good pitcher. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if not before the season starts, somewhere in the middle of the season, you see the Cubs start to look at adding another pitcher to this roster, because I still think they're a starting pitcher short of being a championship caliber team.
Yeah, too, there's still some tires being kicked maybe in San Diego. I saw some film of Hoyer pacing back and forth on a phone call at training camp the other day. But Hoyer did state he was direct at the fact that the money was laid out for Bregman only. He said, we might do a few minor things, but the squad is basically what we see now. Alex, Kyle, is there any chance that the Chicago Cubs end up with a Dylan Cease and a deal? Any chance?
Very slim. Slim to none, I would say. I mean, the thing is, they signed Nick Pivetta, and people thought, oh, that could be a signaling of trading guys away. But if you look at the way the contract is structured, they're basically paying him very little money this year and then more backloading that money after this year, because the Padres are not going to re-sign both King and Cease. Like, we know that's not happening. So I think they're trying one more shot at, winning with Cease, with King in their rotation. Am I saying it's absolute zero? No, but I'm saying if there is a chance, it's probably under 10%.
Okay. Kyle, what do you think? You agreeing there?
Yeah, I mean, Sean, is it worth giving up prospects for when you're rental? I mean, here's the problem with the Cubs. I mean, first of all, you just traded for a superstar that we've been begging for in Chicago for the last 5 years, of Kyle Tucker. I mean, you have to start thinking about an extension at some point, if it's even realistic. Dylan Cease would cost you more prospects. The future of this baseball team lies in the farm system and in young talent like Matt Shaw, PCA, Miguel Amaya, trying to get these guys to play consistently. I just don't know if it's worth. I mean, if the Cubs thought they had a chance of winning a championship mid-season this year, they'd go out and make a trade like that. And that's still, I don't think they would do it. But I mean, Sean, I'd say the chances of a guy like Dylan Cease, a name that big, would be slim to none. And, just like Chicago, right? How many of these Chicago teams do we see that get rid of young talent and then try to trade back for him 2 or 3 years later? It's disappointing. It's disheartening. I mean, we saw the same thing with Isaac Paredes last year, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone should be excited because Kyle Tucker is, one of the best players in this game. His numbers are very, very close, if not equal to Mr. Juan Soto over the past few years since 2021. So this is a great addition for the Chicago Cubs. I wish it would have possibly came with an extension. But if I took Kyle Tucker out, obviously is the best Cubs offseason addition. Give me your next best piece that he added and why in this offseason. And maybe who was his worst addition that you see that he added to this team?
Yeah, so I think the move for Ryan Presley would be number 2, behind Tucker. And I just think it's because of the importance of the position. And again, with Presley's age, we could see things change a little bit this year, and it might not end up being the second most valuable acquisition that he makes. But as of right now, just in terms of addressing a need and not giving up anything really for him, I think that was, the good move right there. I'm not going to say this was a spectacular move, but I do want to point something out real quick is I liked the Carson Kelly deal because they needed a veteran catcher. Carson Kelly was the best choice in a pretty weak catcher class this year in terms of, what the market looked like, but he's really good at throwing runners out. And that is something this team could not do to save their life for the past few years, so he's not going to be a juggernaut at the plate. He does have a little pop in his bat, but, consider the veterans we've brought in the past few years. Yan Gomes, I think, was a great move. Last year, he just aged out. He bottomed out. That happens. The first 2 years, though, Yan Gomes was a valuable asset. But you look at some of the other, like, the guy that used to be on the Reds. Blanking on his name. No. The catcher that used to be on the Reds, Tucker Barnhart.
Tucker Barnhart.
Yeah, that just that was a terrible investment because that was a year where the catcher market was great, and they settled with Tucker Barnhart. That just, we knew Tucker Barnhart was over the hill at that point. The Christian Bethancourt thing, it's kind of funny. That was kind of an out of nowhere thing that ended up turning out really, really good. But we all know that was kind of one of those temporary Band-Aids where you're like, okay, you get the career journeyman veteran catcher that doesn't hit much. He just kind of happened to hit a hot streak in Chicago. You knew that wasn't going to last very long, so you kind of milked what you could there. Kind of like when the Cubs got Rene Rivera back in 2017.
Yeah.
It was kind of one of those things. But, you were searching for a veteran catcher, and I think Carson Kelly was the right move there. Does he eye-pop you with all the other metrics? No, but he's reliable enough. Now, in terms of worst move, the Colin Ray and Matthew Boyd deals, I hate those. I hate those with every fiber of my being. And maybe they find something there. Maybe they do. Matthew Boyd has barely pitched over the past 4 years. I understood last year he looked really good. And if you had a more established pitching staff and you brought him in on a 1-year deal, all for it. But you gave him 2 years, $29 million, and you're using him and Colin Ray to patchwork your rotation when there were much better options out there. You didn't even entertain Max Fried. You didn't even entertain Corbin Burns. you went with that. You tried going with the finding the diamond in the rough again in a rotation when you're trying to win. And it's cool and fun when you're rebuilding and you find a Jake Arrieta. That's not the situation here. I just, with what you're paying Ray and Boyd, I hope I'm wrong. I really do. Maybe Colin Ray ends up being a solid 5 for you. And if he does, great. But you could have done so much better than cobble that together. And I know with Matthew Boyd, you're basically trying to replace Drew Smiley, but say that line again. You're trying to replace Drew Smiley. Like, so I don't know.
It's funny. I mentioned that to Kyle the other day when we were talking about the show and, the rotation. I said, looking at Matthew Boyd is exactly what you said. I said, this seems like they just replaced Drew Smiley with Drew Smiley. Like,
exactly.
Any better. So maybe
they find a diamond in the rough. I don't know. I feel like you're taking a risk there.
Kyle, who are yours, man? Who outside of Kyle Tucker, obviously?
Sean, the one that kind of flew under the radar and I think is a really good signing for the Cubs is Eli Morgan, man. I mean, this guy's 28 years old. If you look at his statistics year in and year out basis, he's actually gotten better basically every single season. I think he's actually going to end up playing a pretty big role for the Chicago Cubs team. I think a lot of people don't understand that guy is coming off a career year. I mean, 1.93 ERA last year. He's a guy who seems to be ascending in baseball. I agree with Alex that those two 34-year-old journeymen, middle of the road pitch. We've seen the Cubs do this time and time again. It almost seems like every single season the Cubs just signed a bunch of guys and hope one of them can catch fire and have a career year. But it's like I said, it's not going to work for you every single time. We've seen it, like we saw what they did with David Robertson, and those stories are awesome. It's great. It's fun to watch, but you can't continue to do that. You see these championship teams like the Dodgers, Yankees. These guys go out and get the best of the best, and here's the Cubs like, oh, we'll sign Matthew Boyd. We'll get Ray. Hopefully, one of them has the best season they've had in a long time. Like, you guys, that's not going to win championships. They've gotten lucky, like Alex was talking about. I mean, Yan Gomes hit better than we thought he was going to be here, right? Even David Ross was probably better offensively than we thought he was going to be here. Yeah. Benthacor comes in here last year and starts hitting home runs. We're like, who's this guy? But it's not going to work forever, Sean. Sooner or later, you have to start signing blue chip players, blue chip talent. And the Cubs need to address this rotation. I mean, you can't just continue to throw money at it with subpar, middle-of-the-road pitchers and expect to be one of the best rotations of baseball. They need the Cubs. We're the Chicago Cubs, guys. We're one of the biggest sports franchises in the United States of America. They need to start signing blue chip talent.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to this spending thing. But before I get to the spending money part, I want to, and we're talking about building this rotation. Alex, maybe you can explain to me, Kyle, maybe you can explain to me, have the Cubs just wrote off Ben Brown? I mean, I think Ben Brown will excel in the bullpen, but what about Jordan Wicks? And is signing Colin Ray and Matthew Boyd kind of like the hope that we're going to gain Cade Horton up to the major league rotation at some point soon? Can one of you guys help me out here? Because Jordan Wicks seemed pretty decent as a starter. So
I think they still believe in those guys. I think that this is where we're getting some insurance, so to speak. And I think Ben Brown can still very much be a part of this equation. In Jordan Wicks too. The nice thing is that with Colin Ray and Boyd, this is a positive here, is that they'd have no problem being a bullpen role if they needed to. If you need to switch things up and you needed, swing long relief in the bullpen, sure, you can do that. And maybe they thought that signing a big arm was going to prevent, guys like Cade Horton or Ben Brown. But my personal opinion is if you're trying to go for it, then go for it. Bring in, established arms, I mean, the tricky thing with Ben Brown is he had such a weird, odd injury last year. Things seem okay now, but it was like such a mystery to them what was going on with him exactly. And maybe there was just a little worry there physically. The talent-wise, I mean, we saw early last year the potential he has. Like, I saw some Kerry Wood in him, just kind of the way he throws and pitches. I saw a little bit of that in him. So I would love to see him get another crack at the rotation. I would love to see him just even excel in a relief role. And if that's where he does, fine. Like, I just want him to, do well, work with this team, and have a solidified role where his power arm can come and play. Jordan Wicks is a bit of a mystery to me because I've been one of the bigger supporters of Jordan Wicks, but you only have so many spots. He's used to being a starter. but I do think that he was being written off a little too early, because if you remember his first go around in 2023, if you remember even his major league debut, when he had that changeup working, it
Yeah.
looked lethal.
Yeah.
Absolutely lethal. And last year was strange because you saw some of the promise, but then he had that game against the Dodgers where he gave up like 6 home runs and things kind of ballooned from there. So I'm not giving up on him by any means. It's just going to be interesting how they piece this all together, because there could be a point where you need to make a sell/buy move where you're trying to make a win now move, but you might need to sell some of the guys that are on your team. So we'll see how that goes.
Kyle?
Yeah, it's weird, Sean. It's just a strange situation. I mean, like Alex said, I mean, Jordan Wicks, when he was drafted, we were told he has a ready MLB ready changeup. He's going to come up quickly. It took him a couple years to get up here. It was a strange start to his career, and then he came up and he exploded off the scene. He had a great debut. He looked amazing, and then last season he kind of fell off. He was getting rocked, like like Alex mentioned in that Dodgers game. I am certainly not out on Jordan Wicks. I think if Jordan Wicks can get everything together and reach his potential, reach his peak, he could be a very good pitcher in baseball. The strange thing to me is I think that in the Cubs' minds, their scenario would be that Ray and Boyd start for them, and then you could have Ben Brown and Javier Assad be these long inning relieving guys, but I would rather see it vice versa, right? I mean, you know what you're going to get out of Boyd. You know what you're going to get out of Ray. They've been in baseball for a while. They're both 34 years old. You'd like to see the Cubs focus on the youth, right? You'd like to see Ben Brown and Javier Assad get another crack at the rotation and have those two other guys, the two veterans, be the long relief guys. But it doesn't seem like that's their plan right now. I think things are going to be changing this season often, guys. I think we're going to see a lot of stuff getting shaken up here.
Yep.
I think Craig Counsell is still trying to figure out this team just as much as we're trying to figure out this team. But yeah, I'd certainly like to, for sure, Ben Brown, give him a chance at the starting rotation at some point. I mean, when he was healthy last year, when he first came in, he looked great. And there are times where when Ben Brown is on, he's a dominant. He's almost unhittable. So I'd rather lean on that than lean on guys like Ray and Boyd, who you know what you're going to get. You know who they are. They're 4 to 5 ERA guys. They're not going to light the world on fire. I mean, those guys should be like an afterthought for the Cubs.
The other thing too is I don't know why they're giving up on Javier Assad as a starter. I mean, he's been pretty dominant as a starter for the Chicago Cubs. I mean, his earned run average was in the low 3s for a consistent period of time. So it's a little bit weird.
Year and a half.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what they're doing here, but hopefully Craig Counsell does, and that's why we brought him here to put this all together. So in Counsell we trust, I guess. The little bit of bad news, and I want to know where you kind of guys fall with this, was and it doesn't seem to be serious because I did see Matt Shaw out there fielding grounders in training camp yesterday. But it seems to be he has an oblique injury, and it seems these oblique injuries just keep coming up for the Chicago Cubs. How concerned would we be if we did lose Matt Shaw, and where do we go because we lost in the Bregman deal? And the second part of that, in the pursuit of Bregman, was this a Nico Horner bye-bye? What's your take on that whole situation, Alex? I know he's coming off the tendon surgery, but.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think they had like kind of a plan A, plan B. I think if plan A was Bregman, they would do certain things with the roster, including Nico. And if it's plan B, then he's sticking around. Here's the thing is it's played off as unserious. Like you said, he was taking grounders, light batting practice yesterday.
Yeah.
Obliques are tricky. Whenever you see an oblique, no matter what the injury, you get concerned. That is a tricky, if it said, oh, he had a little back soreness or, he had a little shoulder, okay, it's sometimes that just happens, but an oblique, that gets tricky. So there is a little bit of concern there. And I do think you need to add another bench bat. There have been rumors about Justin Turner. But I think if you add Justin Turner, that's more of a DH first base at this point. I don't think Turner's playing third base anymore. He hasn't played much third base the past few years. He's 40 years old. That is where you get your backup to Michael Busch. So I don't know if that directly correlates with that. The thing about third base now is if you look past Shaw, you have John Birdie. I actually like that signing. I thought that was a good bench signing. The problem is you don't want that to be a long-term third base solution because John Birdie doesn't hit for power. Does he get on base? Yes. Does he have great speed? Yes. But that's a guy I want either pinch hitting, platooning, pinch running in certain situations, not playing third base every day because he doesn't have the power. I don't want another Nick Madrigal bat in terms of power at third base. I don't want another Miles Mastroboni type power at third base, you know? So one idea I floated around, and I'd love to hear your guys' take on this, is I wrote about it for Cubby's Crib a month or so ago, maybe 2 months ago, and I refloated it today, is if you do need insurance at third base, one name available out there is Paul DeYoung. Paul DeYoung played a mound of third base last year. And if you guys remember, when he was on the White Sox, is he a big on-base guy, average guy? No, but he does hit homers. He hit 20-plus homers last year. So you would at least be getting a guy where you could say, okay, if you put him at third base, I would trust him to play third base. His defensive metrics last year at third base were actually pretty damn good. And if that's a good third base glove you need to plug in that can hit for power, I think that's not a bad insurance option, especially considering that if you remember his time with the Cardinals, he was always good for a back-breaking home run every series at Wrigley Field. So he knows Wrigley Field. He's hit well at Wrigley Field in terms of power. So I'm just floating that out there. I think maybe the reason he wasn't signed yet was because he was waiting out for a starting position, and he just might not get that, where you could say, okay, you know, you might not get a starting position, but here you go. Here's a bench job. You'll be hitting in certain situations, because I truly believe when you look at the options out there, whether you look at Turner, whether you look at Paul DeYoung, having a right-handed guy that could hit for a little pop wouldn't be such a bad thing to have. I know people have floated around bringing Anthony Rizzo home as your backup first baseman, but to me, having another lefty when you're platooning with Michael Busch potentially, and Michael Busch is going to be playing most days, but if there's an off day he needs where you need a backup first baseman, I would like to have a righty in there. And as much as I love Anthony Rizzo, I think the clock has struck midnight there on the career. So, yeah. I know.
You're breaking my heart. You're breaking. I told Kyle, if there's one guy in probably the last 10, 15 years in Chicago sports I'd like to sit down and have a beer with, it would be Anthony Rizzo.
Sure.
And not only that, I talked to Kyle about this a few weeks ago, and I was like, man, wouldn't it be great to just bring him back and you make perfect sense with the lefty and lefty, but just to have that experience and have that guy on the bench. I mean, he's a true Chicagoan. He loves Chicago, the Cubs. Just to have that experience on the bench and help develop these young guys. I mean, just think how he could help Michael Busch develop, continue to develop. I don't know. For me, it was more like a bench coach thing. Just get him under a 1-year deal.
Yeah, Sean, bring him back to sell peanuts. I don't care. Just bring him back for 1 year. I don't care. I love Anthony Rizzo, man. He's one of my favorite players in Chicago sports history. He's absolutely awesome. I do agree with Alex. I think his best days are well behind him, especially with all the back issues. But Anthony Rizzo's meant so much to the city. You know, the Cubs winning World Series in 2016 for the first time in 100 whatever years. He was a huge part of the city of sports, and I think it would be awesome to see him 1 year. But certainly not playing on the field, guys. As much as I love the guy, I'd say his career is pretty much over. But yeah, the Matt Shaw situation is a little concerning. It's like you guys said, man, the oblique in baseball is like the hammy in the NFL, man. You just never know what you're going to get. Some of those injuries can last 2 weeks. Some of them can last 2 months. You just never know. But I agree. The Cubs have to do something at third base. They can't just go into this season with Matt Shaw only. And I think Paul DeYoung would be awesome here. Because, I mean, it's like every Chicago sports story ever, right? He's a Cub killer. He was a Cub killer when he was on the Cardinals. We watched him, like those timely home runs he hit against the Cubs were heartbreaking. It'd be nice to have that guy on our team. And like you said, just in a limited role. He's not going to play every day, but just in case Matt Shaw goes down, he's certainly a guy who could come in and fill in. The Matt Shaw situation in general is kind of strange to me. I mean, like at the same time, the Cubs were like, Matt Shaw is awesome. He's amazing. He's coming, third base. The same exact time, they're like, we're still in the Bregman sweepstakes. We're still in the Bregman sweepstakes. Don't worry, guys. We're still like, what? All right. Is Matt Shaw the future? Or is he not? And you see some reporters picking him to be like the NL Rookie of the Year. Other people aren't even talking about him. It's just another one of these ifs on the Chicago Cubs, and they've got a lot of them this season.
Yeah, and I do want to make a quick point to that is I'm high on him too. Don't get me wrong. I think he's got a lot of potential. He's my favorite of all the Cubs prospects. I don't want to say this in a generalization, but as good of a prospect as he is, there were some, whisperings of, oh, remember Chris Bryant, remember Chris Bryant. This is no disrespect to Matt Shaw, but to me, he is not Chris Bryant.
No.
Chris Bryant was breaking records in
Yeah.
the minor leagues.
Yeah.
He was the MVP in the minor leagues. 2014, he had over 50 home runs. He was homering every single day. That was a generational prospect. Again, I really like Matt Shaw. I think there's a lot of upside. But Chris Bryant, like, you had baseball outlets reporting on him every single day in the minors. He was that good. I just would not compare this situation to that.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Bryant was being mentioned with the likes of Bryce Harper. I mean, he was by all accounts, there was people saying like Vegas had his odds on winning MVP, Rookie of the Year. I mean, Matt Shaw to me is not that guy by any means necessary. I think Matt Shaw can be a very consistent hitter for the Chicago Cubs, but he's never going to be Chris Bryant when Chris Bryant was in his prime. Obviously, right. I'm just confused by all the what you read about Matt Shaw is just all over the place. It's all over the place. Like I've read a few sports writers now that claim that he's going to. They have him like a lock as the NL Rookie of the Year. Like, well, then if that's the case, why were the Cubs pushing so hard to go sign Alex Bregman? I mean, obviously the Cubs don't agree, but like I said, Sean, during this season at some point, Craig Counsell is going to start to mess with his lineup a lot. You're going to start to see a lot of changes here at some point. I think he's still trying to figure out this team just like we are. There's so many ifs on this Cubs team going into this season that it's going to be an interesting season. I think what's more important to the Chicago Cubs than the addition of Kyle Tucker and all this bullpen pieces and the youth and development of PCA and Amaya is the consistency of guys like Ian Happ, Seiya Suzuki, Nico Horner, Dansby Swanson. The Cubs certainly 100% need more out of Dansby Swanson's bat. I mean, they just signed this guy to one of the biggest deals in Chicago Cubs history. He cannot continue to hit one or 200 for this season. He has to start getting that average back up to around 270.
I mean, how concerned are we about Nico Horner? I mean, he did come out and say feels like he's ahead of where he was. But as to one of our chat members here, Steve DeMattis has pointed out, is his back foot wiggles a lot in that box, and he picks it up. And how big he started off as seemed like he was going to be a really great hitter, but that's kind of seemed to slow down a little bit. How concerned are we about Nico, or are you guys not concerned at all?
I think he's just got to play healthy. Last year, he was not right. He had the wrist issues. He obviously had the surgery. And that goes for Dansby Swanson too. Neither of those guys were 100% last year. Dansby Swanson had multiple procedures done, and we knew that at the end of 2023 he was not 100%. You could see it. And then as Dansby got healthier in the second half of the season, we saw him hit again. And I think that, here's the understanding with Nico. He's not going to hit for power. His on base isn't going to be crazy, but he's going to be the guy that can hit, foul pole to foul pole and hit for average. I know hitting for average isn't what it used to be, but I think there is still a use for guys that do that in Major League Baseball. So I think, because if you look at the previous 2 years in 21, 22, 23, we saw how good Nico was as a hitter who didn't have the power or the walk rate. But he was still a darn good player. And I think a healthy Nico Horner will be a very valuable asset to this team.
Kyle?
Yeah, it's just strange to me, Sean. I mean, you could definitely tell that both those guys were laboring a little bit last season, which is strange, because when we signed Dansby Swanson, it's like, this is Mr. 162. This guy never misses a game. He's the most consistent player in baseball, and they get to the Cubs, and you can tell he's kind of banged up. I do think I expect both those guys to have better seasons, but I do think at this point, Nico Horner to me is probably the Cubs' first and biggest trade piece. I think if they did decide to make a trade at some point in the near future, he may be one of the guys involved in that trade. But I do expect both those guys to have better seasons at the plate. The thing that's strange to me is, you kind of saw the same thing with PCA last year, where that back foot was like wiggling a little bit, and then they brought him in and they made an adjustment, and he became a totally different player at the plate. It's strange to me that they can't do the same thing with Nico Horner. Maybe it just didn't work. They've tried and it didn't work. But yeah, his stance, his movement before is a little unorthodox to me.
Yeah, and speaking of, we're going to get into some of these splits because I really want to get your guys' opinion on three guys in the lineup that are going to make the difference for the Cubs. And I just watched a piece. They had it on Marquee with Dennis Kelly that what they did with PCA's hitting stance and how they started picking up his leg. And you could see the results. His slash numbers are down at the bottom, post the swing adjustment. I mean, he was on fire at the end of the year. Like this was the 5-tool player that we wanted to see. I mean, he's an outstanding baseball player, and I have all the hope in the world for him. So do you guys to expect him to take off right where he left off, or do we still have to worry about, the rookie jitters still? Because I don't really consider him a rookie, seeing that he was here most of the year. What are your thoughts of 2025 PCA?
Yeah, I think the ceiling is very, very high. I think he's going to continue to build from last year. You are still going to see growing pains, though. I do think that that is going to be a part of it. And, you have across the ticker here, you look at the slash line. Think about this. If he hit at that slash line, that second half right there, the 262, 310, 425, if he hit that with the speed that he has, you're loving that. You're absolutely loving that. Now, if you would have said, okay, what if he hit 10 points less, but that OBP went up 10 points, I'd be even happier. I think if you get a 400 slug from him, you got to like that a lot.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard even some of his rival players say that he is the most athletic player in all of baseball. I mean, when he gets on base, it's dangerous, man. I mean, how many bases did he steal in a row consecutively without getting caught? I mean, PCA is just a pure athlete. That's what he is. And I think the key to this Cubs team is that outfield, guys. I think if Ian Happ can do what he did last year, PCA can continue to do what he did at the end of the season, and the Kyle Tucker comes in here and continues to do what he was doing in Houston, I think that's huge for the Chicago Cubs. I think they might have one of the best outfields in all of baseball. But yeah, I mean, Sean, you're definitely going to see, I think, some up and down from PCA. He's still a young player in baseball, but I mean, man, if he continues to do what he did at the end of last season, he instantly becomes one of the best players in baseball, right? Sean, I think you even said there was like a bet over under for like over 1.5 inside the park home runs this year. I might be tempted to take that.
You don't see bets like that very often these days.
Right. What do you think of that, Alex? Would you take a gamble on that? Over 1.5 inside the park home runs for PCA this year.
I'd be tempted to. I mean, when you look at all the different ballparks across baseball, all it takes is one weird bounce. I mean, think about even at Wrigley Field, if you hit a deep line drive and it hits off like the base of the basket and it takes a crazy carom, that's an inside the park home run right there. I mean, even just looking at some of the NL Central ballparks, that you kind of have that gap, those gaps in Miller Park where the wall kind of juts out. And if you hit it in such a way, St. Louis, they have pretty big gaps out there. Pittsburgh, you hit it into that area where it juts way back in left center. That is a prime spot for an inside the park home run. And it might not even be on the fly, because we've seen guys hit low line drives that'll skip onto the grass and it'll just roll all the way out there. I mean, there are so many possibilities for PCA to get an inside the park home run at PNC Park. The only place that I think would be difficult is Cincinnati, but Cincinnati is basically Coors Field Central or East, if you want to call it that. It's just such a hitter-friendly park in terms of balls going over. But yeah, I could see him getting an inside the park or two at PNC or even like Miller Park.
It's definitely Coors Central for Ian Happ, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Great American Ballpark.
Sean, if there's anybody in baseball who could do it, it's
PCA. Did you guys happen to see him coming into camp with his head with the stars on it?
Yes.
Yeah, he's coming in saying, "Hey, man, I'm going to be an all-star this year."
Yeah,
and that's the attitude you like to see. Honestly,
yeah,
I mean, this city right now has lacked so much of that. I think and I think Caleb Williams kind of exuberates that. There are some guys there that do, but when you're getting pushed into the dirt every 2 seconds. But I just think we need more of that winning attitude here. And I want PCA to electrify this team, because when he was playing better, everything looked better in terms of the
Yeah.
offense. And
Mhm.
Pete Crow Armstrong is a guy where if you can just put the ball in play, you have a great chance of chaos ensuing. It's like whenever he got on, something happened. A guy misses a cutoff man. A guy throws it away. He takes an extra base because someone's not paying attention. When you're a weapon like that, it's one of those things where it's like so many possibilities can happen with that. Heck, it's like Devin Hester back in the day. If you kicked anywhere in his direction, chaos could ensue. That's what you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah, those guys, and even like guys like Javier Baez, Almago, that's their energy is infectious, man.
Yeah.
They bring a whole new dimension to the game
Yeah.
of baseball. Like PCA, well, like exactly like Alex said, when he started to hit, when he's you could tell he was having fun out there, constantly has a smile on his face. He loves playing baseball. There's no doubt about that. And even with the inconsistencies, I don't think there's a Cubs fan in the world that doesn't like Pete Crow Armstrong. He's just seems like a really down to earth guy. Loves baseball. I think his mom was an actress in a baseball movie at
Yes.
some point. I mean,
Little
yeah,
big league.
there's nothing about the guy I don't like. And like you said, Alec, Chicago needs more of those athletes, 100%. And it's kind of strange, guys. It almost seemed like the second that PCA started the game started to slow down a little bit for him, he started to hit at the plate. Miguel Amaya kind of like followed suit. Like everything
Mhm.
started to come together as soon as it's like with Dexter Fowler when he used to play on the Cubs, and Joe Madden always say, "When you go, we go." To me, that's
Mhm.
PCA right now. He needs to
Mhm.
be that guy.
We just threw because Miguel Amaya was another guy I want to speak about. I just put his splits up on excuse me, up on the bottom from the first half to the second half. And I know Cubs Nation last year was really, really impatient with Amaya, and Kyle can contest to this. I had that dude's back. And I was like, guys, give this dude some time, man. Please, please, please just give this dude some
Yeah, you
time.
never wavered, Sean. You never
No.
wavered.
And he didn't make me out to be a liar in the second half of the baseball season last year. But again, same question I posed to you. Which Miguel Amaya do we have, first half or second half? What are your thoughts on Miguel Amaya? Because he's an excellent framer of the baseball, too, behind the plate. So what are your thoughts, Alex? First half Maya, second half of Maya? Did it click? Did the light go on? What are your thoughts on Miguel Amaya?
I mean, the way to optimistically look at that situation is they explained the changes they made. It wasn't some like fluke, oh, all of a sudden he started hitting better because the ball found grass, a few choppers, it found a hole. Like they explained in detail what kind of changes he made to his stance, and the fact that you saw those results. Like that was an active change of approach that got you better results. So that to me is a much more optimistic look at what Miguel Amaya can do. And, you're displaying right now, first half, second half. You look at the numbers. If you told me he hits 270 with a 310 OBP, even like a 430 slug with a WRC plus around 110, 115, you got to like that from a catcher. You really do.
Oh, yeah, you do. Kyle, what are your thoughts on
Yeah, I
Mr.
mean,
Amaya?
Sean, he's kind of like almost at this point, a lot of catchers in baseball, you expect them to be around that 250, 270, and they're good framers, they're good defensive players, they can pick players off. Man, if Miguel Amaya could be the second half Miguel Amaya all season this season, that'd be like a luxury for the Cubs. I mean, if they can get a catcher who can consistently hit, that makes this lineup a lot more dangerous. Late in the season, if you guys remember, it was the bottom half of the lineup that was doing a lot of the damage for the Chicago Cubs. So if they can continue to do that, at some point the Cubs need to have a lineup 1 through 9 where it's like there's no easy out, right? And for the past 5-6 seasons, they've just had too many of those.
Right.
If those guys on the bottom of the lineup, back half of the lineup, can hit consistently, this Cubs team's a lot better than people think, for sure, no doubt about it. Miguel Amaya and PCA are going to be huge factors in determining how far this Cubs team can go.
And widely thought, Adley Rutschman being one of the best hitting catchers in baseball, second half of Amaya's season was actually better than Adley Rutschman last year.
Yeah.
So, it's something to look forward to. We got Steve out there asking, and this is one of the questions we were going to hit in just a little bit in the lineup, and we'll get back to the last conundrum I have for you guys. But let's ask, because it's an interesting question. Who do you think is the best leadoff man for the Chicago Cubs this year? Because eventually, I personally think getting PCA at the top of the lineup might be a great idea. But right now, taking that pressure off of him and having him in the bottom of the lineup, I think works until he fully develops. But what do you guys think? Who's the best leadoff man for the Chicago Cubs baseball team this year?
I'm sticking with
And it
Ian Happ.
sits.
I'm sticking with Ian Happ right now because, I mean, you look at the way he gets on base and walks, his eye at the plate. There you go. Look at that opening day right there. Ian Happ at the top. We see his approach. We see that he can hit those gaps with doubles. I think right now that's your best bet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kyle?
for me, it's either Ian Happ or Nico Horner, Sean. I think at least to start
They
the
have
season
Horner.
off, for sure. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, Horner.
it's got to be one of those two guys. If Nico can get back and be more consistent like he was the first few years here and can hit for average, then I would maybe consider sticking him there. But right now, I agree with Alex 100%. With the way that Ian Happ played last year, I mean, let's face it, guys, he was probably the best Cub last year, and that's disappointing because on a good team like the Dodgers, Ian Happ's probably their 5th, 6th, 7th best player, but
yes,
he was the best player for the Chicago Cubs last year. He was certainly the most consistent player for the Chicago Cubs last year, and he has earned that leadoff position until he proves otherwise. So, yeah, for me to start the season, he's hitting first, yeah.
And I don't know if Alex is going to remember this at all, but on X last year at the beginning, when he was struggling at the beginning of the year, Alex, you actually talked me off the ledge because I was ready to throw this guy out of town. So this guy couldn't hit the baseball, and everyone's like, "Oh, Ian Happ will be fine." I'm like, "God, this guy sucks, dude."
Well, Sean, I think that's more expectations, right? These guys who the Cubs have signed to these 3-year deals, getting paid $60, $70, $80 million. You just expect more from them, even if they're having maybe not their best season ever. You expect, you're like, you know what? These are the guys we paid. These are the guys the Cubs decided to make the future of the team. Nico Horner, Ian Happ, Seiya Suzuki. We need to get more out of these guys, and you have every right to expect that, Sean. Every right, especially from Seiya Suzuki, because there was one point where the Cubs were talking like he was going to be the next superstar in Major League Baseball, and all we've seen is inconsistency and injuries.
Well, for me, when it comes to Suzuki, you know how much I love Suzuki too. I really love.
That's your boy, Sean.
So do I. So do I.
It's Miguel Amaya, Michael Bush, and Seiya Suzuki for Sean. Those are the Cubs.
I got Bush hanging up back here.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I absolutely love Seiya. And Alex, I texted you the other day about we're going to have to get into this because Seiya for me is such a conundrum. Like, when you look, I put down here at the bottom his splits through the month, and he's I believe he's a lifetime like almost 280 hitter for the Cubs. So you can't be too upset about that. But when you start looking at some of this stuff here, and you start looking at how the inconsistencies really are, it's like, man, August through October are great, but what's happening through March and July that he's been so inconsistent? And maybe, what are your thoughts on this true conundrum, which is to me, Seiya Suzuki?
I think it's the injuries, honestly, because if you remember in 23, he didn't start the season. He had to come back from an oblique injury that happened in spring training. And then last year he got hurt early on. And if you remember in April, he was hitting the absolute crap out of the ball before he got hurt. So, because we were thinking, hey, maybe this is the year he makes an game. And then he got injured, and then he had to work back from it. And then when he finally got healthy again, you look at the last 3 months of the season, he was killing it. And you remember what happened at the end of 2023. Absolutely killed it. So I think it's that I really like Seiya. I think he's underrated in a number of ways as a hitter. He's quietly been among the best National League hitters in terms of just overall production. The one thing that you'd like to see from him in terms of health, obviously, that's one thing. But if he's healthy and he plays 150 games, I'd like to see him closer to that 30 home run mark. He can hit 20, but I'd like to see him closer to 30. That's what I was hoping we were going to get last year, but those oblique injuries, that hurts that. But I think he's a very good hitter overall.
Yeah, Sean, we heard rumors or whispers that he might be upset if he was moved to permanent DH and taken out of the outfield. But man, please take him out of the outfield, please. First of all, he's not very good in right field. Second of all, the guy is dealing with injuries as it is. I mean, if the Cubs could use him as DH and he can stay healthy there, I honestly do still believe that Seiya Suzuki has superstar power. I think he can be one of the best hitters in baseball if he can stay healthy and hit consistently. But yeah, I mean, It's going to be interesting to see him in like kind of that DH role this year. I think it'll do wonders for him, man. And I still think Seiya Suzuki is going to be a huge part of the Chicago Cubs team in 2025.
I'm going to pray that oblique stays away from him, because it seems like he misses 6 weeks every year with that. And as you can see, I just put on the bottom his starting in right field versus being a DH last year. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Kyle and I were screaming this all season last year as we're watching this guy botch balls in right field. Like, just put him at DH. And I just watched that interview they had with him on Marquee with his interpreter, and I don't know, I've never seen him really roll his eyes. Like, he seemed really annoyed that he's not playing in the field. I don't know that he's 100% happy, but he has to look at it and say, God, he's got to get better as a fielder. And the one funny thing is I have a huge Seiya Suzuki baseball card collection. And on the back of his card, it says he was a 3-time defensive award winner in Japan. And I'm sitting there like, well, what happened? What happened to this guy?
No, Wrigley's not the most forgiving right field, for one thing. The other funny thing about Seiya is I'll say this too. If you look at some of his defensive metrics, they don't look bad. They don't look great, but they don't look bad. The problem with Suzuki is how many times he's flubbed the most routine of plays. Like, if he has a ball going back towards the corner, we've seen him run those down. Even in his rookie year, we saw his arm, like just a rocket of an arm out there. But it's like, if there's a pop fly right to him, you know, we saw it last year against the Reds in that one game before he hit the redeeming grand slam. We saw him in Atlanta when things fell apart those last few weeks of the season. Those are plays that a high school outfielder makes. And that's just the whole weird thing about it. Because even like the plays in front of him too. But like, if he's going back on a ball, he usually runs those down, but you got to make the routine plays.
I agree. I think that part of the reason they stand out so much is not only just because it's such a routine play and such a simple mistake, but it's that some of them are very timely mistakes. That's another thing that hurts, say, Suzuki bad. That game where I forgot who they were playing, but where he was like saying that there's something in his eye, that lost the game. I mean, that lost the game for the Chicago Cubs. You have to make those routine plays in clutch time when you're talking about the 8th and 9th inning, guys. You have to, especially with how much our bullpen was struggling last year. You got to go out there and help those guys out and make those plays. And it just seems like for the Cubs, when things start to go bad, it kind of snowballs.
Right.
Now we're gonna break down this division really quick before we put a bow on this thing. And once again, Alex, thank you for coming out and breaking down this 2025 baseball season with us. Thank you to everybody in the chat: Scott, Steve, Ant Mass, Dustin, Breaking News, Bruce, Notorious TBG, Elizabeth, K9. We really appreciate y'all showing up on an early snowbound Saturday morning to hear us blabber about Cubs baseball. As we get into this last segment here, we talked about this a little bit at the top of the show, but the Milwaukee Brewers have been working with duct tape, glue, and a staple gun and a Dollar General budget, amazingly enough, to keep finding ways to win the NL Central despite having few stars outside of Christian Yelich. So my first question for you guys is, can the Brewers general manager Matt Arnold keep working his roster magic and keep the Brewers 2 steps ahead of the rest of the division in 2025? And part 2 of that is, how does Arnold and the Brewers keep defying the playoff odds and winning this division, even after they keep moving on from players, as you mentioned earlier, Alex, like Devin Williams and Willie Adames, which I'm really happy that's gone, because God, did he love to kill the Cubs.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, thank God. Get out of here, Adames, please.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, until he doesn't, it's like, I'm going to assume that he can work that magic. I mean, and the thing is, I think Jackson Chourio is going to be a superstar. I do not like having to face him a lot. And like guys like Bryce Terang are really difficult to face. Now, Christian Yelich, he's had back problems. He's older. You saw him dip some years. And then the last few years when he's been healthy, he's played very, very well again. He's looked more like the all-star Christian Yelich. Now, remember, he had a season-ending injury last year. And I mean, I don't doubt his ability, but just physically, I don't know what that's going to look like going forward. So I think that that's going to be one of the questions. they always seem to pump out great high-powered arms. Even when you lose Corbin Burns, obviously you still have a number of arms over there. They lost Colin Ray to us, if that really means anything, but they'll find a way, man. They always do.
It's so annoying.
I know.
Talk about finding the diamond in the rough, man. He is the best manager in baseball doing so. But I will say, man, losing Willie Adames, that's huge for them. I think that's a lot bigger than people think. Another guy people haven't really talked about this offseason is William Contreras. I mean, that guy, to me, he is becoming star level. He's one of those guys that needs to be talked about when you bring up the Walker.
They called him the best catcher in baseball in terms, like, when they were doing rankings of every position, they put William Contreras there, and he might be the most underrated superstar in baseball.
Yeah.
Good call. I can't believe I missed that one.
Yeah, he's the one who scares the hell out of me every time we play the Brewers. Every time when he comes up and there's 2 men on base and it's the 8th inning and the Cubs bullpen struggling, I'm like, oh God, please, not William Contreras. But yeah, he hasn't been like as much of a Cub killer. I mean, he's had great seasons. He's just not doing as much against the Cubs. But yeah, I expect William Contreras to get better this year as well. And like Alex said, man, there's those young guys, Churios, those guys they scare the living hell out of you for sure. And it seems like no matter, they can go to, like you said, Sean, they go to Dollar General and find one of the best pitchers in baseball and give him moment. It's like, why can't the Cubs do this stuff, man? Take a page out of their book. We should be developing guys just as well as they are.
Yeah. Now I did last year. I had the Yankees, the Orioles, and in the NL Central, maybe a year too early, and I'll get your opinion on this right now. The Cincinnati Reds, who to me were one of the National League's most disappointing teams in 2024, finishing at 77 and 85 in 4th place in the Central. They went all out and getting a legit playoff manager and signing 2-time World Series champion Terry Francona. Francona's a suave baseball guy. He likes to play chess, and he's got a young team core that has potential future stars like Hunter Green, Rhett Lauder, Chase Burns, Nick Laudo, and enough power. Do the Reds have enough power to make it a Red October and steal this division from the Chicago Cubs?
I think they can, if they're healthy. If Matt McClain is healthy, who did nothing but hit his rookie year, if Marte takes a step forward this year, if Ellie De La Cruz plays like Ellie De La Cruz, Hunter Green is obviously really good. You mentioned one of the other pitchers. I remember seeing him at Wrigley last year, that very last series. I believe that's when it was the final Kyle Hendricks game, that ended up being, a close game. But you watch him, you're like, wow, that guy looks pretty darn good. So I am a little concerned about the Reds. The one thing I will say about the Reds is, if you want to look at a big weakness of theirs outside of health last year, is outside of Ellie De La Cruz, their defense stinks.
Yeah.
Their defense absolutely reeks.
Yeah.
So could that improve this year with Terry Francona and a coaching staff and some other players? Sure, absolutely. But I don't think you're going to see a swallow of gold gloves won in Cincinnati. But I think if they have the young arms and they are healthy and can hit, they can overcome that.
Yeah, especially in that ballpark. I mean, earlier I said that some of PCA's rival opponents have said that he's the most athletic player in baseball. I think Eddie De La Cruz would have something to say about that, man. That kid is special. He absolutely is. The only thing, Sean, is I think, we've been told now for years that Hunter Green's going to be this great pitcher. Yeah. Maybe he's just inconsistent. Maybe this is just who he is, right? I mean, this is just kind of seems like the guy he is. Like, it's like when the Cubs traded for Jose Quintana and they were like, the potential of this guy, he could be one of, like, yeah, but I mean, he's been in baseball for a few years now. This is just kind of who he is. You're going to get months where he's pitching to a 1.5 ERA, and you're going to get months where he's pitching to a 4.5 ERA. It's just kind of he's kind of like somewhere in the middle, right? But yeah, I think if they can't stay healthy and they continue to hit for power the way they have, I think that team could be at 100% could be absolutely dangerous. But it's like Alex said, they have to play better on defense. If the Reds can't get better on defense, they are not going to win this division. There's not a chance.
A couple more before we put a bow on this. Then we got a little homage to PCA before we roll out of here. And I'm really interested in the other two teams in this division, because I'm kind of an O'Neill Cruz guy. I really like his potential so far, but how much progress forward will the surging ace Paul Skeens and the Pirates, who finished with 76 wins and 5th place in the Central last year, make this season. And Jared Jones was a stud last year as well. Are they a threat at all, or are they just, hey, we got Jones and Skeens and not much else?
Yeah, I don't think they're a threat to win the division, but they're definitely a threat to give you a tough time. I don't think they're going to be a pushover by any means. I mean, maybe they're a 78, 79 win team somewhere around there. Because like I said earlier in the show, when you think of the Pittsburgh Pirates, they just don't make the big moves. They rely on everything kind of coming together for them, and then they don't make the big moves, and then eventually they trade everybody away. But I mean, on days you got to face Paul Skeens. And you look at what the Cubs did against Skeens. In 2 of the games, they fared quite well against him. In another game, they looked like a T-ball team facing a major league team. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I do like some of their other starting pitchers. I like O'Neal Cruz a lot too. I've been sitting and waiting for Brian Hayes to be that superstar, and you see the glimpses. You don't see a bad player, but I remember in 2021 seeing that kid at Wrigley Field when he was young, when the Pirates played the Cubs. And I was like, wow, that kid has the potential to be a legit superstar. I think he can still make a step forward, but it's a better version of, remember Gregory Polanco? Their outfielder.
Yeah.
I think he's, I think he's better than that. But I just remember a good 3-4 years where everyone's like, oh, Gregory Polanco, he's going to break out. He's going to be a star. And he never just quite was. So I'm interested to see what Brian Hayes can do. You look at everywhere else and you're like, okay, they didn't sign any big names. They didn't sign any like multi-year deals of like 4 or 5+ years, because they never do that. We know how cheap Bob Nutting is. And, they've had some success over the past 15 years of developing guys, Andrew McCutchen being one of them. We saw how good Paul Skeens can be already, as a young phenom. We see what O'Neal Cruz can do. And there are some other guys out there too. But when you don't make the big trade or you don't sign the big guy, it's hard to go far, at least have a sustained run at that. Because the Pirates had those 2-3 years where they were making the playoffs, and then it just fell apart from there.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for Brian Hayes because, obviously he's had a lot of health issues, and man, but if that guy could stay healthy, I agree with you. It looked like he was going to be one of the best players in baseball for a long time, but it's just been inconsistent ever since. And, your success against the Pittsburgh Pirates is predicated off what part of the lineup you're going to run into when you run into them, man. If you get Jones and Skeens in a 3-game series, that's rough, man. I'm telling you, I'm tempted to take Skeens over 2 no-hitters this year. I mean, that guy, when he's on, he is going to be the best pitcher in baseball for sure. There's absolutely no doubt about it. He is amazing. But yeah, it's like they kind of remind me of like the Detroit Lions, right? Like even when they'll start the season like 20-4, and they're like, oh man, look at the Pirates. They're finally starting to put together. But then they go and Detroit line it up and Pittsburgh Pirate it up. And it's like Alex said, can you imagine if this team wasn't so cheap and they paid their player? Can you imagine if you were facing Skeens, Jones, Garrett Cole, Jameson Tyon? I mean, this team could have been a really good team in baseball for a long time, but they just don't want to pay anybody, Sean. And until they do, they're going to be stuck down there at the bottom of the NL Central.
And speaking of teams that don't want to play anybody, can anybody explain to me what the hell is going on with the Deadbirds, where management seems to be rebuilding this team to the core, and they're jettisoning stars like Goldschmidt and Arenado, and seemingly trying to alienate one of Major League Baseball's best fan bases. They're also the only team in baseball that didn't add a free agent in the offseason. So what is going on with the Deadbirds right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're looking at this as like a soft transition. I think they believe in some of their prospects because, they have a knack for developing guys, and they're kind of just going through this transition to where they say, okay, we're not going to completely tear this down. We're going to try to compete a bit, but we're not going to spend any money to try to compete right now as we go through this transition period. And the Cardinals are just, the last few years, they were just such a bland, kind of non-existent team where they weren't the worst team in baseball. They weren't good enough to win anything of note, they had household names like Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado, and they brought back Lance Lynn, and you had Sonny Gray obviously added, but like the whole entity of the Cardinals was kind of like they're just in this middle void with like not really much of an end game. And I think there is an eventual end game here, but you're in a very weird transition. And the way I see it is while the empire is down, take advantage.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the mid 2000s, you know, when the Bears won back-to-back NFC Norths and they made the Super Bowl. Those were the 2 years where the Packers were down. You know,
Yeah.
Brett Favre, who had dominated for 15 years, they finally hit that rut. And the Bears took advantage of that. You got to do the same thing here because I don't think St. Louis is going to be down very long. Although you hear about what some of these ex-players have to say about the way DeWitt runs things now, like what Jim Edmonds was saying a few weeks ago or a week ago, whenever that was. Maybe, and this is big knock on wood because I feel like I'm taking a big risk here. Maybe part of that organization has lost its touch, that its arrogance over its past accomplishments has gotten the best of them finally. And maybe they don't see that yet. But if you were to, you know, have me put some money on it, I would bet within a few years they're back to being relevant again. It's hard to go against that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what really well said, Alex. They have a winning culture, and at some point, the Cardinals are going to start winning baseball games again. It's time for the Cubs to take advantage while they can. You know, it's kind of strange. You know, the Cardinals are always known for being really good draft and developed team. They a lot of homegrown talent there, and then they went and they decided to go kind of try to buy a championship with Arenado and Goldschmidt. It didn't really work out. Now they're kind of like in this rut. Their pitching over the last few years has been inconsistent. I mean, they had guys who had like promise, guys who we were told were going to be really good, but they never really kind of met their potential. I just kind of I think right now they're probably focusing more on the future, probably going to try to spend as little money as they possibly can. And then when they feel like some of this talent starts to develop, and they can start to add pieces around them. But yeah, it's just strange, Sean. It's weird. It's strange for all of baseball, to be honest with you. I mean, you just expect the Cardinals to be like the Yankees and Dodgers. They're always going to be good. They're always going to be a formidable opponent. But as of late, it just seems like things haven't worked out for them. And maybe Alex is right. Maybe they got too cocky. I don't know. It's just strange to see the Cardinals in that position. But you're right, Sean. It's weird. It's almost like they're just content. Like they haven't done anything at all. I mean, we've heard whispers of them trying to trade certain players, but for the most part, they've just been kind of staying in their lane, just steadily rolling down the road. It doesn't make sense. But it's not the Cardinals I've known for the last 30 years. And like Alex said, I expect at some point for the Cardinals to come back around and be the Cardinals we remember in the past.
And to your point, you made an interesting point about how they kind of tried to buy a championship. If you think about it, since 2017, there's quite a big list of like guys they brought up that they traded away. Sandy Alcantara, Aldolis Garcia. And you're like, oh, they traded those guys away for like the Marcelo Zunas of the world. And it's like that didn't get them to where they wanted to be. So it's a very good point that you mentioned that.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it scared the hell out of me. I mean, Paul Goldschmidt, when he was in his prime, man, that guy was absolute. I'm like, oh God. So let me get this straight. You guys got rid of Albert Pujols, and now you brought in Paul. Oh, great. That's awesome. Nice. But it, like you said, it just didn't work out for them, man. There's just something going on there in St. Louis. But you know what? The Cardinals are very, very important to that city of St. Louis. That's their pride and joy, man. That's where they hang their hat. We're a football town. They're a baseball town. The Cardinals will come at some point. That fan base will probably force ownership into doing better there, and I think the Cardinals will 100% get back.
They're already kind of starting. I mean, you remember last year when you saw those stories and you saw those Cardinal games that were like 2/3 empty, and people were like, "Yo, you could buy a $2 ticket for like solid seats today."
Yeah,
you're already seeing the effect of that.
That's crazy because that whole area out there, that all around the stadium, it's like Wrigley. I mean, that's like that is their pride and joy. If you go to St. Louis, you're like, what should I do? They're like, go see a Cardinals game. Go see a Cardinals game. Like, you expect them at some point to start giving back to their loyal fan base there. And I think they're just kind of in a little rut, Sean. I think it's almost impossible to be good every single year, right? Every team has problems, but I 100% the Cubs take advantage of this while you can right now, because it's not going to be long before the Cardinals are competing again.
I'll give you my feeling. That's I'm you know how much I hate St. Louis, and I'm also a Jayhawk, so that part of town does mean a lot to me. But it's the one team out there. I love Kansas City, the Royals. Bobby Witt Jr. is probably my favorite player in baseball. I mean,
He's unreal.
Yeah. Every day I talk to Kyle about Bobby Witt Jr. and I wish that guy could be a Cub.
He is unreal. Like, you could say he's a top 3 player now in the game.
Oh yeah, he probably could have gotten some MVP. I mean, what Bobby Witt did last year. I don't know how many people who are like diehard baseball fans really noted how amazing what he did last year. I mean, it was absolutely phenomenal. And on top of that, guys, you talk about these guys who have like infectious personalities and infectious energy. Yeah. That guy, man, he loves baseball. He absolutely loves baseball. And it's fun to watch.
I'll tell you this, Kyle, I was screaming at the top of my lungs that he should have been the MVP last year. That Royals team is not a good baseball team. He single-handedly got that team to the playoffs. I'm sorry, Aaron Judge, you got a stack lineup. All these other guys are playing with a full deck. This guy's just out there leading a team to the playoffs that without him would not be there.
Yeah,
I mean,
they swept the Royals. Or they swept the Orioles, yeah.
Yeah, they swept the Orioles.
And name 4 other players on the Kansas City Royals. What Bobby Witt Jr. is doing there is absolutely amazing. Like Sean, like you said, man, it would have been amazing if the Cubs could have somehow pulled, because Kansas City's another one of those teams where they start developing talent. They're like, oh, no, let's get rid of them before we got to pay them.
Right.
But they didn't take any time paying Bobby Witt.
Didn't Witt? I was going to say Witt just got paid, didn't he?
Yeah, he got a big extension.
Yeah, I think he got the biggest contract in Royals history, didn't he?
Oh, by far, by a country mile. Yeah.
Yeah, I lived in Kansas City for a while, Alex. I was there when they won the World Series.
Yeah.
With Alex Gordon and all those.
Yep.
Yeah. And Eric Hosmer was actually like a good baseball player.
Actually good, yeah.
Yeah, but man, that team was loaded. Salvador Perez, they had a really good team. They had amazing pitching
Johnny
staff.
Cueto on that team?
Yes.
Yeah, Cueto was.
And their bullpen was untouchable. I mean, you could once they got in the 7th inning, it was done. The game was over. Yep. But they don't have that team. They have Bobby Witt Jr. and they're still, he pushed them into the playoffs, man. I love that guy, dude.
I love that.
So do I. I'm a huge fan of Bobby Witt Jr. Huge fan.
Yeah, I got a huge baseball card collection of him too, and I'm really happy I got him when I did, because I don't know if I can afford him these days, because that guy is unbelievable. And speaking of the best player in baseball, a couple more before we get out of here. Who's the division's best player, guys?
In the NL Central.
That's a tough one.
Paul Skeens.
It's tempting to say Paul Skeens.
It might be.
I'm going Paul Skeens.
I think Ellie De La Cruz has a shot at that title as well. I think if he reaches his potential, Jackson Chourio has a potential to be that. I could also say Kyle Tucker is the best in the division.
He's certainly in the conversation. No doubt about it, man.
It's not like when we were kids where it's like, oh, it's Albert Pujols. Like, it's not even a question,
Yeah.
And that brings me to my next one. Now you brought up Jackson Chourio. Who's the best young player in this division?
Yeah, I'm going to go with, do I go with him or Paul Skeens? I think Paul Skeens has already showed you, like, holy crap. Like, this is this is a generational talent. The scary thing about Skeens, the way he throws, I don't want to wish it upon him. Don't get me wrong. I feel like there's going to be a Tommy John in there at some point.
Yeah. I knew we were going with that. I agree, man. There's just the mechanics, how hard he throws, the fact that he can do it consistently through 7, 8, 9 innings. I mean, that eventually, it's almost like you're delaying the inevitable. Almost all of these guys at some point sustain a major injury, and I expect that with Paul Skeens. But man, if we haven't seen him reach his peak yet, I don't even want to know what that looks like, guys. That's going to be record setting.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. For me, it's probably Paul Skeens, but I'm really hoping it's going to wind up being PCA.
Yeah, I knew you were saying.
That would be cool.
I will say, Paul or PCA has a very unique skill set that you don't really see that often.
Yeah.
The guy doesn't have to hit 400. If he even just takes a walk, if he gets on base, the other team's starting to sweat. He's just dangerous. He's a dangerous player, man, and he creates havoc in baseball. You don't see that very often.
With the Phillies, the Dodgers, let's say the Phillies, the Dodgers, the Braves, possibly if the Mets can repeat, is the only way for a team in the NL Central to make the playoffs to win the division.
Yes.
No wild
Yeah,
cards
I think
coming out of the NL Central.
Yes.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, I have my doubts on
agree.
that. Yeah.
I agree. And we're gonna put a bow on this here in just 1 second. Just want to pay a little homage to my guy really quick.
That one drilled out towards right center field. Pete Crow Armstrong racing, and he made the catch. What a play from the Dodgers. Race is gigantic. Otani hits that one out towards right center. And Pete Crow Armstrong, holy cow.
Making catches, covering all the ground. He's like, I'm not going after it. You got everything, pal.
High fly ball out towards right center field. Pete Crow Armstrong at the wall, jumps, and he made the catch. Oh, baby. Steals the homer from Max Muncy, and that is how this one comes to an end. That kid is something else.
We're gonna
Love
see
it.
a lot more. Good to
Now,
see a
real
lot.
quick, I just want to ask Alex a couple questions before we got here. A, Alex, what do you think the final record is going to be for the Chicago Cubs? And
Yeah.
B, do you think that Presley will finish the season as a closer, or do you think a guy like Porter Hodge could finish the season as a closer? Who do you think? How do you think that bullpen will play out for like the 7, 8, 9 per se?
So prediction for record, I'm going to say 87 wins. In terms of the closer, right now, I think Presley is my still safe bet just because that's what you brought him in for. Would Porter Hodge being put in that situation surprise me? No, but right now I'm going to put my confidence in that.
Okay. I'm going to go, I already bet Scott and Steve. I took the over 88. So I'm going to have the Cubs at 88 wins.
Yeah, I think we're all pretty similar. I think we all got them around 87 to 90 wins, somewhere in there.
Yep.
I will say though, if Kyle Tucker could have like his best season in baseball since he's joined the MLB, Major League Baseball, and all these ifs we talk about, can Suzuki stay healthy and hit for power, can all. If it all pans out, guys, this team, that's their problem with the Cubs right now. It's just so tough to predict what they're going to do, man. If everything went well for them, they could be a very, very, very good team in baseball.
If Tucker lives up to these numbers right here, we're going to be really happy.
Yeah, I think so too. Yep.
Let's hope Fangraphs is on the ball on this one. And it's interesting because Bakota has the Cubs as the third most wins in baseball, I believe. And then you have Fangraphs that has them at 84 wins, and we're somewhere right in the middle.
Yeah, even the experts are like, "Ooh, the Cubs." I don't know.
Yeah.
Real quick, Alex, before you leave, I have to ask this question because I haven't done enough research into it. What are the chances that they extend Kyle Tucker?
I don't think it's very good.
Yeah, dude, it breaks my heart.
I
knew what you were going to say. And it
Yeah.
breaks my heart, man. It's like you trade young talent to get this guy here, guys. Like, please, Cubs, for once in your lives, sign a $300 million contract, please.
So you really don't believe they're going to open up that wallet for Kyle Tucker? 8 years, $400 million. That's out of the Ricketts budget.
I think with this inevitable lockout coming up, I think they're going to be very conservative with their budget. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be very, very wrong, but I just don't see it right now. I just don't see it.
Unfortunately, man, I agree. History usually repeats itself, and the Cubs have never signed a contract like that before. I just don't. They're probably not going to do it. And it just stinks because it's like Cubs fans have been begging for the superstar for how long now? They've got one here, and it's going to be like, all right, well, thanks for that cup of coffee. Nice to see you, man. Take it easy.
Right.
Alex, I said this because I'm arguing with people the opposite, that I think he would have a chance to sign here. Do you think falling in love in right field, playing in Wrigley Field for a season, could play that factor in him maybe taking a little bit of a less deal because he actually loves it here? I'm not saying 200 million. I'm saying maybe 300 million, maybe 350 instead of the 450 they're talking about for him.
That's $100 million. That's $100 million.
The former presidents on the Bills are the ones that talk the loudest. That's just the way I see it here.
Listen,
I agree.
Listen, it's as fans, we sit here outside the box. They're like, "Oh, come on! I would take less money to play it." But like, that's $100 million.
Yeah,
That's $100 million.
This is why I'm not investing in a Kyle Tucker jersey. I'm gonna pass on that $150 investment.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm not doing that either. No way.
If he resigns, I'll buy one immediately. And I like those new baby blues that they just brought out because I am a big baby blue fan, and those new jerseys are sick. Like I love them to death. I'm gonna be.
I just got the Sweet Home Chicago jacket. I don't know if you saw that.
No, where's that? Is it handy?
Oh, I don't have it with me, but I posted it online, so I'll have to send you a picture.
It's a new one. It's a new jacket they made.
Yeah, so I think you can only get it at the Cubs store right now, but it's like a windbreaker. It's a dark blue, and it's got like the old time Cub Bear logo, but it's like the blues theme. So it's got like a little guitar, and on the back, it's got that logo with Sweet Home Chicago around it. It's like one of the coolest jackets I've ever bought.
Sounds amazing. I'm definitely gonna pick one of those up.
It looks like I might be buying one of those.
Yeah. You should. It was 160, I think. Well worth it.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh wow. Yeah, definitely send a picture over. And you know what, Alex? Kyle and I make it out to Wrigley, and I know you pop up on X and you just randomly show up there. So
yes,
maybe we'll run into you one of these days out there.
Or maybe we can plan something, man.
I think we should plan something. Yeah.
We usually go around his birthday around May 5th. I don't know if the Cubs are in town this year, but what was the first year that Swanson was here?
23.
Last year, the year prior.
23. Yeah, we went for his birthday, and we're all like, "Yeah, dude, we get to see Dansby Swanson. We get to see Dansby Swanson.
See anybody."
The Cubs gave everybody the day off.
Not only that, but Alex, you remember like some parks around baseball do the May the 4th be with you, and people come in and Star Wars stuff. We went on May 4th, and there was none of it. I'm like, this is just a disdisappointing day.
That's too bad.
Didn't they lose
too
too
bad?
They lost
but we got to see Julio Rodriguez, who is another one of my favorite.
And I think they lost like 1-0. It was awful.
Oh, is that a game against the Mariners?
Yeah.
It was that guy. It was that tall, slender pitcher with long hair, and he had been awful all season.
Yeah,
we're gonna kill him, and then he allowed like 2 hits. I'm like, oh god.
Yeah, because I remember that series. I think they took 2 or 3, and then they lost that one. So
we had that wild comeback in the 9th inning in that series. Is that against the Mariners? They
wasn't
won,
that when Nelson Velasquez hit the grand slam?
Yes, I think so. Yep.
Yeah.
Of course, we went.
And the other game was a Nico walk-off single, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And we went to the loss.
Well, that was me in 2016. So my dad and I, we used to buy every year the like 6-pack of tickets. So you get like 6 games. And for that pack, it was the Sunday getaway games. So like it was like the only games all year they lost at Wrigley, because it's like, okay, we won the series. We're going to have Tommy La Stella at first, and we're going to have Matt Caesar out in left. And they lost pretty much all of those games. So it's like we kind of got saddled with that. But yeah, I was notorious for being the guy that goes to the only losses that year.
Yeah, it's like going to an NBA game nowadays. It's like it's a crapshoot, right? Like
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and going to it'd be like we're going to pick one game a year to go to the Lakers game. Are Anthony Davis? Well, not anymore. But are Anthony Davis and LeBron James going to be playing? Like, is it worth?
Yeah, exactly. But now you're guaranteed if you go to a Bulls game, you're just going to get crap.
Yeah. You can root Kobe White on. You can root that rookie on. I don't know.
Bozellus is good.
I like him a lot.
Good.
Let me ask you a question real quick, Alex. Not to keep you here, but if you redid the NBA draft today, where does Bozellus fall?
Maybe top 5. Maybe.
Yeah. Right. Maybe 4, 3, 4. I mean, you look at the rest of that rookie class. It looks like the Bulls may have made a very smart decision. I can't believe I'm saying this.
One of 20. So unfortunately, everything else got us screwed over. But
they'll wind up trading him. They will. He won't want to be here.
They'll trade him to the White Sox.
Yeah. I'll tell you, man, I feel really bad for both of those fan bases, man. I mean, I would root for the Bulls if they were good. I wouldn't say I'm an NBA fan because I'm really not. I love college basketball. I'm a Jayhawk. I love college basketball to the end of the earth. But I mean, and the Bulls don't really help because they're god awful.
No.
I saw something somewhere. I think Scott told me. He said if the White Sox won like 80 games, they would be like the most improved team in the history of baseball.
It's like a 40-game swing.
Yeah, 80 games. You have an 80-win season, and you're going to be like the most improved team of the history of any team that's ever played baseball.
Well, think about it. Yeah, I mean, the Royals last year took like what, a 20-game swing from being like 100 loss. If the White Sox took a 20-game swing, they still lose 100 games.
Yeah, that's insane.
Which is, man.
You know, and on this podcast last year, Alex, I was telling people we were doing like a betting show, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm saying this, guys, but I would take that under on the 59.5. And people were laughing. People were like, you know how hard it is not to win 60 games of baseball? I'm like, but if anybody can do it, if anybody can do it, Jerry Reinsdorf could do that.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Reinsdorf has to get rid of both those clubs, man. And like I said, I feel awful for both fan bases because I know there's a lot of loyal Bulls fans out there, and some of my greatest friends are White Sox fans, and they're just like,
They're jumping ship, Sean.
A lot of them are.
Yeah.
You know, we might actually end up at that first. I think it's the first weekend. One of our co-hosts, Matt Cooper, is coming in, and he's going to end up at the Royals White Sox. And I told him, I said, dude, if it's Royals White Sox, I'll take my happy ass out there, and just so I can watch Bobby Witt for 9 innings.
Watch Bobby Witt and get some of that good food they have at that stadium.
Well, if Sean's going, Bobby Witt's going to get a rest day. For sure.
Yeah, probably. Hey,
Alex,
man,
thank you so much, man, for being on today, dude. We really appreciate your time, man. I know
this was great.
Ran a little bit long, but love listening to you, man. Follow your stuff. Can you tell all the viewers and listeners where they can find you, man?
Yeah, so if you go on X, I'm at ShyFanPat2. Have in my bio where you can find my work, whether it's Swirsky Sports or Through the Garden or Fansided or Shy City Sports. You could also go to my website, alexanderjbackcreative.com, to see all the stuff I do there. So this was amazing. Let's do this again. I think that we'll have plenty of talking points over the year that we could share together. So let's do this again, guys. This was great.
Yeah,
absolutely. Man. Thank you, guys. Thank
you
again.
Absolutely. I loved and enjoyed it, man. And seriously, obviously Sean's got your contact info. Let's plan on getting out to a game together, man. Because
sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you for the compliments here on the chat. Thank you very much. Glad you listened.
And thank you. And everybody, don't forget, we will be back on Monday for the Hallis Hall Hangover. And next Wednesday, we'll be back on the Barely There podcast. And Alex, when are your shows? When do you post your shows? What days of the week?
Yeah, so Swirsky, we usually record on Sunday night, so that usually comes out Monday or occasional Tuesday if we have to record on a Monday night instead of a Sunday. And then Through the Garden, we usually do midweek, so Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday is when you could find that. And then the articles I post are pretty sporadic, but the podcasts are pretty consistent.
Okay, perfect. And do you do the Through the Garden all year round, or is it just back for baseball season?
We do it all year round. We've just, me, Tommy, and Jordan, we've been a little more sporadic just because life during the week has just been very busy for us. Yeah. So, it's not always as consistent there. Swirsky, we go every week, but our peak is definitely during Bears season. So we're all Chicago sports on Swirsky, but the Bears are our main focus.
Yeah, I feel that. The Bears definitely pay the bills in Chicago. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the difference in viewership is crazy when you're talking about the Bears, especially if you're trying to do a show about the Blackhawks or the Bulls or the White Sox. Yeah, it just doesn't. People just aren't interested.
Yeah, it's down, and I think today went off well, and hopefully as the Cubs progress and if they get off to a hot start, people will start caring a little bit more.
And then Sean, I'm sure Alex, he told you this, but this is our first show at 11 a.m. So people, it's kind of, people will get used to it once the show's on consistently. But yeah, we'd love to have you back, man. You do a great job, man. Everything you do is well. It's all well said. I love your takes, your opinions, and it'd be nice to talk to you again for sure.
Well, it's great talking to
Absolutely.
you guys. Hit me up anytime. I love the work you guys do. So keep it up.
Thanks, man.
Awesome. Thank you
Appreciate
so much, Alex. Everybody out there, don't forget Monday and Wednesday. Until then, stay safe out there. Watch out for that snow. Stay safe on the streets. We love y'all. We thank y'all. Bear down, cub up. Let's go, baby. Thank you, everybody, and good night or good afternoon.
Good afternoon.